Hello everybody, this is chapter 8 of A Story of a Vet. Just do the answers for questions for the last chapter. So the questions were, what's the name of the lady whose dog gets run over right at the beginning? And her name was Mrs. Donovan. Next question, what kind of dog is Roy? And Roy was a golden retriever. And the next question number 3. What's the name of the RSPCA inspector who rang James and asked him to go with him to see that poor dog? He was called Inspector Halliday. So, well done if you got those questions right. Going to do chapter 8 now. Okay. Hope you enjoy chapter 8, and then we'll do questions after. Okay. James, how would you like to officiate at the Darrowby show? Siegfried threw the letter he'd been reading onto the desk and turned to me. I don't mind, but I thought you always did it. I do, but it says in that letter that they've changed the date this year, and it happens I'm going to be away that weekend. Oh, well, fine. What do I have to do? Well, you have to measure the ponies and be on call. So yeah, all the ponies need measuring. And you have to be on call in case any of the animals are injured or ill. That's about all. Yes, so it's not difficult. Right, I said. I think I should just about be able to manage that. Splendid. Siegfried tipped up the envelope in which the letter had come, and here are your car park and lunch tickets for self and friend if you want to take somebody with you. Don't forget your vet's badge, okay? The Saturday of the show brought the kind of weather that must have had the organisers purring with pleasure. A sky of wide, unsullied blue, hardly a whiff of wind, and the kind of torrid, brazen sunshine you don't often find in North Yorkshire. As I drove down towards the showground, I felt I was looking at a living, breathing piece of old England. The group of tents and marquees vivid against the green of the riverside field, the women and children in their bright summer dresses, the cattle with their smocked attendants, a line of massive Shire horses parading in the ring. I parked the car and made for the steward's tent with its flag hanging limply from the mast. Tristan parted from me there. He headed purposefully for the beer tent as I went in to report to the show secretary. Leaving my measuring stick there, I looked around for a while. A country show is a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Riding horses of all kinds, from small ponies to hunters, were being galloped up and down, and in one ring the judges hovered around a group of mares and their beautiful little foals. In a corner, 4 men armed with buckets and brushes were washing and grooming a row of young bulls with great concentration, twiddling and crimping the fuzz over their legs like society hairdressers. Wandering through the marquees, I examined the bewildering variety of produce, from stalks of rhubarb to bunches of onions, the flower displays, embroidery, jams, cakes and pies. I heard in the air gusts of melody. I strolled across the grass to where the Darrowby and Hulton Silver Band were playing Poet and Peasant. The bandsmen were of all ages, from 70s down to 1 or 2 boys of about 14, and most of them had taken off their uniform jackets as they sweated in the hot sun. Pint pots reposed under many of the chairs, and the musicians refreshed themselves frequently with leisurely swigs. I was particularly fascinated by the conductor, a tiny, frail man who looked about 80. He alone had retained his full uniform, cap and all, and he stood apparently motionless in front of the crescent of bandsmen, chin sunk on chest, arms hanging limply by his sides. It wasn't until I came right up to him that I realised his fingers were twitching in time with the music, and that he was, in fact, conducting. But my attention was jerked away from the band as a group of people walked across the far side. It was Helen, with Richard Edmondson, and behind them Mr. Alderson and Richard's father deep in conversation. The young man walked very close to Helen, his shining, plastered-down fair hair hovering possessively over her dark head, his face animated as he talked and laughed. There were no clouds in the sky, but it was as if a dark hand had reached across and smudged away the brightness of the sunshine. I turned quickly and went in search of Tristan. I soon picked him out as I hurried into the beer tent. He was leaning with an elbow on the counter of boards and trestles, chatting contentedly with a knot of cloth-capped farmers, a pint glass in one hand. There was a general air of happiness. Drinking of a more decorous kind would be taking place at the President's Bar behind the steward's headquarters, with pink gins or sherry as the main tipple. But here it was beer, bottled and draught, and the stout ladies behind the counter were working with a fierce concentration of people who knew they were in for a hard day. "Yes, I saw her," said Tristan, as I gave him my news. "In fact, there she is now." He nodded in the direction of the family group as they strolled past the entrance. "I've had my eye on them for some time. I don't miss much from in here, you know, Jim." "Oh, well," I accepted a half of bitter from him. "It all looks pretty cosy. The two dads like blood brothers and Helen hanging on to that bloke's arm." Tristram squinted over the top of his pint at the scene outside and shook his head. "Not exactly. He's hanging on to her arm." He looked at me. "There's a difference, you know." "I don't suppose it makes much difference to me either way," I grunted. "Well, don't look so mournful." He took an effortless swallow which lowered the level in his glass by about 6 inches. "What do you expect an attractive girl to do? Sit at home waiting for you to call? If you've been pounding on a door every night, you haven't told me about it." "Well, it's all right you talking," I said. "I think her father would set his dogs on me if I showed up there. I know he doesn't like me hanging around Helen, and on top of that, I've got the feeling he thinks I killed his cow on my last visit." "And did you?" "No, I didn't. But I walked up to a living animal, gave it an injection, and it promptly died. So I can't blame him." I took a sip at my beer and watched the Alderson party, who had changed direction and were heading away from our retreat. Helen was wearing a pale blue dress, and I was thinking how well the colour went with the deep brown of her hair, and how I liked the way she walked with her legs swinging easily and her shoulders high and straight, when the loudspeaker boomed across the show ground. "Will Mr. Harriet, veterinary surgeon, please report to the stewards immediately?" It made me jump, but at the same time I felt a quick stab of pride. It was the first time I'd heard myself and my profession being publicly proclaimed. I turned to Tristram. He was supposed to be seeing practice, and this could be something interesting, but he was immersed in a story which he was trying to tell to a little stocky man with a fat, shiny face, and he was having difficulty because the little man, determined to get his full pleasure of enjoyment, kept throwing himself into helpless convulsions of laughter at the end of every sentence, and the finish was a long way away. Tristram took his stories very seriously. I decided not to interrupt him. A glow of importance filled me as I hurried over the grass, my official badge with veterinary surgeon in gold letters dangling from my lapel, A steward met me on the way. "It's one of the cattle. Had an accident, I think." He pointed to a row of pens along the edge of the field. A curious crowd had collected around my patient, which had been entered in the in-calf heifers class. The owner, a stranger from outside the Derby practice, came up to me, his face glum. "She tripped coming off the cattle wagon and went head first into the wall. Knocked one of her horns clean off." The heifer, a bony little light roan, was a pathetic sight. She had been washed, combed, powdered and primped for the big day, and there she was with one horn dangling drunkenly down the side of her face, and an ornamental fountain of bright arterial blood climbed gracefully in 3 jets from the broken surface high into the air. I clamped a pad of cotton wool and antiseptic powder onto the stump and secured it with a figure-of-8 bandage round the other horn. "That's it then," I said to the farmer. "The bleeding's stopped. Anyway, I'd advise you to have her properly dehorned soon, or she's going to look a bit odd." When that was all finished, I went for lunch. The lunch was so excellent that it greatly restored me. Although it was taken in a marquee, the committee's men's wives had somehow managed to conjure up a memorable cold spread. There was fresh salmon and home-fed ham, and slices of prime beef with mixed salads, apple pie, and the big brimming jugs of cream you only see at farming functions. One of the ladies was a noted cheesemaker, and we finished with some delicious goat cheese and coffee. The liquid side was catered to, with a bottle of Magnet Pale Ale and a glass at every place. I didn't have the pleasure of Tristram's company at lunch because he had placed himself well down the table between 2 strict Methodists, so that his intake of Magnet was trebled. He's going to drink theirs as well. I had hardly emerged into the sunshine when a man touched me on the shoulder. One of the dog show judges wants you to examine a dog. He doesn't like the look of it." He led me to where a thin man of about 40, with a small dark moustache, was standing by his car. He held a wire-haired fox terrier on a leash, and he met me with an ingratiating smile. "There's nothing whatever wrong with my dog," he declared, "but the chap in there seems very fussy." I looked down at the terrier. "I see he has some matter in the corner of his eyes." The man shook his head vigorously. Oh, no, that's not matter. I've been using some white powder on him, and a bit's got into his eyes, that's all." Well, let's see what his temperature says, shall we?" The little animal stood uncomplaining as I inserted the thermometer. When I took the reading, my eyebrows went up. "It's 104. I'm afraid he's not fit to go into the show." Wait a minute." The man thrust out his jaw. "You're talking like that chap in there. I've come a long way to show this dog, and I'm going to show him." "Well, I'm sorry, but you can't show him with a temperature of 104. But he's had a car journey. That could put up his temperature." I shook my head. "Not as high as this. It couldn't. Anyway, he looks sick to me. Do you see how he's half closing his eyes as though he's frightened of the light? It's possible he could have distemper." "What? That's rubbish, and you know it. He's never been fitter." The man's mouth trembled with anger. I looked down at the little dog. He was crouching on the grass miserably. Occasionally he shivered. He had a definite photophobia, and there was that creamy blob of pus in the corner of each eye. Has he been inoculated against distemper? Well, no, he hasn't. But why do you keep going on about it? Because I think he's got it now, and for his sake and for the sake of the other dogs here, you ought to take him straight home and see your own vet." He glared at me. So you won't let me take him into the show tent? That's right. I'm very sorry, but it's out of the question. I turned and walked away. I'd gone only a few yards when the loudspeaker boomed again. Will Mr. Harriet please go to the measuring stand where the ponies are ready for him? I collected my stick and trotted over to a corner of the field where a group of ponies had assembled. Welsh, Dales, Exmoor, Dartmoor, all kinds of breeds were represented. A smiling young woman led the first pony, a smart chestnut, onto the boards. Which class? I asked. 13 hands. I tried the stick on him. He was well under. Fine. Next, please. A few more came through without incident. Then there was a lull before the next group came up. The ponies were arriving on the field all the time in their boxes and being led over to me, some by their young riders, others by their parents. It looked as though I could be here quite a long time. During one of the lulls, a little man who had been standing next to me spoke up. No trouble yet? He asked. No, everything's in order, I replied. He nodded expressionlessly, and as I took a closer look at him, his slight body, dark, leathery features and high shoulders seemed to give him the appearance of a little brown gnome. At the same time, there was something undeniably horsey about him. You'll have some awkward uns, he grunted. And they always say the same thing. They always tell you they've bet at some other show past their pony. His swarthy cheeks crinkled in a wry smile. Is that so? Aye, you'll see. Another candidate, led by a beautiful blonde, was led on to the platform. She gave me the full blast of 2 big greenish eyes and flashed a mouthful of sparkling teeth at me. 12-2, she murmured seductively. I tried the stick on the pony and worked it around, but try as I might, I couldn't get it down to that. I'm afraid he's a bit big, I said. The blonde's smile vanished. Have you allowed 1/2 inch for his shoes? I have indeed, but you can see for yourself he's well over. But he passed the vet without any trouble at Hickley, she snapped, and out of the corner of my eye I saw the gnome nodding sagely. I can't help that, I said. I'm afraid you'll have to put him in the next class. For a moment the 2 green eyes fixed me with a frigid glare, then the blonde was gone, taking her pony with her. Just then there was an interruption. It was a man with a moustache. He sidled up to me and whispered confidentially in my ear. Now, I've just been thinking. My dog must have got over his journey by now, and I expect his temperature will be normal. I wonder if you'd just try him again. I've still got time to show him. I turned wearily. Honestly, it will be a waste of time. I've told you he's ill. Please, just a favour. He had a desperate look, and a fanatical light flickered in his eye. All right. I went over to the car with him and produced my thermometer. The temperature was still 104. Now I wish you'd take this poor little dog home, I said. He shouldn't be here. For a moment, I thought the man was going to hit me. There's nothing wrong with him, he hissed, his whole face working with emotion. I'm sorry, I said, and went back to the measuring stand. I measured a few more ponies, and most of the pony owners were very bad-tempered when I told them they had to go into a different class. And I got repeatedly shouted at by the pony owners and their parents. After I'd had nearly enough of this, I felt a hand on my arm. It was the man with the moustache again. I'm going to ask you just once more to take my dog's temperature, he whispered, with a ghastly attempt at a smile. I'm sure he'll be all right this time. Will you try him again? I'd had enough. No, I bloody well won't, I barked. Will you kindly stop bothering me and take that poor animal home? It's funny how the most unlikely things motivate certain people. It didn't seem a life and death matter whether a dog got into a show or not, but it was to the man with the moustache. He started to rave at me. You don't know your job. That's the trouble with you. I've come all this way and you've played a dirty trick on me. I've got a friend who's a vet, a proper vet, and I'm going to tell him about you. Yes, I am. I'm going to tell him about you. And just at that moment, as the unkind words were thick in the air, I saw Helen and Richard Edmondson on the fringe of the circle, taking it all in. I wasn't worried about him, but again it struck me as strange that it should be my destiny always to be looking a bit of a clown when Helen was around. Anyway, the measuring was over and I felt in need of sustenance. I retreated and went to find Tristan. So that's chapter 8 done. Poor old James is not having a very good day, is he? Dear oh dear. Just when he wants to try and impress Helen. Okay. Questions for the next time. So, what did Siegfried say would be James's duties at the Darrowby show? So, Siegfried said he would have to be doing 2 things. See if you can remember what they were. Question number 2. Where does Tristan head straight to after they arrived? Where does Tristan like spending all his time? And question number 3. What happened to the cow James went to treat? So the first animal that James had to go off and treat, something had happened to the cow. Okay? So, good luck with those questions. And I'll tell you the answers the next time. Okay? Hope you enjoyed that. And bye-bye for now.